In recent weeks, a storyline has emerged in the global media that until recently would have seemed absurd. Canada is preparing for a trade war with the United States, but not over oil, gas, or even metals. For the first time in history, the dispute concerns a product that many Americans see as part of their very identity. According to the Financial Times, Ottawa is considering imposing unprecedented tariffs and, in some scenarios, a complete ban on chocolate exports to the US. At first glance, this may look like a minor detail in the endless cycle of trade disputes, but for the American economy and culture, it is a blow that could prove far more painful than tariffs on steel or aluminum. It all began when Donald Trump, upon returning to the White House, decided to update the list of trade restrictions for America's closest neighbors. Sources in the administration confirmed to Reuters that a new package of tariffs is set to be signed this fall. Canadian lumber, agricultural goods, and pharmaceuticals are all in the crosshairs. But unexpectedly, it was in Ottawa that the idea emerged to strike back at Washington in the most painful way possible, by choking off oxygen to the sweets industry. We are studying the possibility of a full revision of quotas and supplies of cocoa and chocolate products to the US market. A senior source in the Canadian Parliament told the Globe and Mail. That statement alone hit like a bombshell. Why chocolate? Because in America, it is not just a commodity. It is culture, a symbol, a part of everyday life. Americans spend more than $20 billion a year on chocolate, according to the National Confectioners Association. In every school, at every celebration, at every sports arena, chocolate bars, candy, and sweet snacks are ubiquitous. Mars, Hershey's, Nestlé USA, these are brands that shaped entire generations. And now Ottawa is threatening to strike precisely at this industry. At first, the idea seemed far-fetched, but soon others began paying attention to Canada's initiative. According to Bloomberg, Ottawa is already holding closed-door talks with the world's largest cocoa exporters, Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, and Nigeria. If successful, Washington could find itself isolated from one of the world's most crucial markets. This could be a point of no return, notes a Deutsche Welle analyst. If the largest suppliers agree to act jointly, the US risks being cut out of the global chocolate trade altogether. The irony is that it was Trump himself who pushed Canada to this step. His America First policy has turned even America's closest allies into seeing Washington not as a guarantor of stability, but as a threat. Aluminum and lumber tariffs hit Ontario and Quebec hard. The automobile tax caused Canadian auto stocks to plunge 9%. In response, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney told a closed parliamentary session, "We can no longer remain hostages of American aggression. The time for new coalitions has come." Those words became a starting point. According to Politico, Ottawa created a special committee tasked with studying the weak spots of the American economy. The result was unexpected. One of the most vulnerable sectors turned out to be the sweets market. Despite the massive brands, the US depends on imports for nearly 85% of its cocoa, and Canada plays a key role in processing and re-exporting chocolate products. A strike on this sector could send shockwaves through the entire US economy, from retail chains to sugar and dairy producers. The Wall Street Journal writes that the White House fully understands the danger. One official, speaking on condition of anonymity, admitted, "If Canada really cuts off this market, we won't just face a shortage. We'll face the social frustration of millions of Americans." Headlines have already appeared in the US. Will there be a Halloween without chocolate? Memes about a chocolate shortage are spreading on social media, but behind the humor lies real anxiety. After all, the blow would land not only on consumers, but also on Trump's political reputation. In a society where chocolate is perceived as part of the way of life, depriving people of it becomes a symbol of failed trade policy. According to the Washington Post, Canada plans to secure the support of the European Union. In particular, Belgium and Switzerland, home to the world's largest chocolate production hubs, are considering joining the coalition. If this scenario materializes, the United States would find itself in diplomatic and economic blockade on a market generating hundreds of billions of dollars in global turnover. International experts are calling the situation the chocolate front of a new trade war, and many believe this is only the beginning. If Canada succeeds, The next step may be coordinating actions on other goods, coffee, tea, rare earth metals. The world is steadily moving away from dollar dependence, and Canada's strategy only accelerates this process. For Trump, the situation is turning catastrophic. While he promised to make America great again, his trade wars are leaving the country isolated. Discontent is growing within U.S. business lobbies. The Confectionery Manufacturers Association has already appealed to Congress to intervene immediately in the negotiations, but time is running out. If by autumn Canada and its allies indeed move to ban chocolate exports to the United States, the world may witness one of the most unexpected and toughest trade wars of the 21st century. And then the issue will not be about candy and chocolate bars, but about the very future of the American economy. Because if allies begin striking at symbols, it means the matter goes far beyond trade. It becomes a political demonstration of force. American experts increasingly acknowledge that it is not only about sweets. Chocolate has become a metaphor for the deeper crisis in U.S. relations with its closest allies. This is more than a trade dispute. This is the beginning of a systemic dismantling of the old order, wrote Jonathan Fields, professor of international relations at Harvard University, in his column for the New York Times. According to him, if Washington loses control over consumer goods markets, trust in the American economy will start to collapse not only abroad, but also at home. But far more dangerous is the international chain reaction. Sources from Reuters report that negotiations are already underway between Canada and Latin American countries, Ecuador and Brazil, where cocoa processing is also highly developed. If the chocolate coalition expands, the United States risks ending up in total isolation on a market it helped shape for decades. One analyst from J.P. Morgan called it the geopolitical sugar act of the 21st century, a reference to the 18th century conflicts when colonial empires fought over control of sugar. For Trump, this is becoming a personal political nightmare. In his rhetoric built around the idea of America first, it was supposed to be allies standing alongside him, but now it is precisely those allies who are forming coalitions against the U.S. CNN cites the words of a former national security advisor. Chocolate is just the beginning. If Washington fails to stop this process, tomorrow we may see similar fronts emerging around coffee, tea, grain, and rare earth metals. From this perspective, the chocolate front becomes a prototype of America's global economic isolation. There is also a cultural dimension. In the United States, more than 300 chocolate festivals are held each year. Halloween, Easter, Christmas, all are tied to mass consumption of sweets. To deprive Americans of chocolate means to deprive them of part of their cultural identity. It is no coincidence that ironic yet anxious slogans have already appeared on social media. Hands off our chocolate. Psychologists note that such symbolic blows are perceived by society far more acutely than rising oil or metal prices. After all, this touches the everyday life of every family. Meanwhile, in Ottawa, according to CBC News, not only an economic but also a diplomatic strategy is taking shape. In the coming months, a Canadian delegation plans to hold a series of consultations in Geneva and Brussels, seeking to consolidate an anti-US alliance at the level of the World Trade Organization. According to sources, the task is simple: to present Washington not as a victim, but as an aggressor who provoked retaliatory measures. If America closes doors to its allies, the allies will find new paths, said one Canadian diplomat. And here arises the central question. What if the chocolate front is truly only the first phase? What if tomorrow Canada announces tariffs on coffee and then on medicines without which Americans cannot manage? Analysts do not rule out such a scenario. After all, this is no longer about trade, but about the global configuration of the world. And the further Trump pushes his pressure-based policy, the faster allies slip out of his control. Thus, the outlook appears grim for Washington. Chocolate, once a symbol of celebration and joy, is turning into a symbol of crisis and confrontation. And if already this fall the Canadian government does in fact decide on a full ban of chocolate exports to the United States, it will not only be an economic blow, it will be a signal to the entire world. The era of American dominance in trade is fading into the past.